Ladies and gentlemen, will you please take your seats? The opening ceremony will begin in 2 minutes. Before we begin this afternoon's proceedings, we ask that you silence your mobile devices as a courtesy to our speakers and your fellow delegates. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the International Association of Chiefs of Police Executive Board. Parliamentarian Ronald Sharpas, Professor, Loyola University of New Orleans. General Chair of the Division of State and Provincial Police, Colonel Tracy Trott, Superintendent, Tennessee Highway Patrol. General Chair of the Division of State Associations of Chiefs of Police, Timothy Lowery, Florissant, Missouri Police Department. General Chair of the Mid-Sized Agency Division, Paul Williams, Chief of Police, Springfield, Missouri Police Department. International Vice President Patrick Stevens, Chief Commissioner of the Belgian Federal Police and Director of Counterterrorism, Interpol. Vice President at Large Richard Smith, Chief of the Wakefield, Massachusetts Police Department. Vice President at Large Wade Carpenter, Chief of Police, Park City, Utah Police Department. Vice President Treasurer Dwight Henninger, Chief of the Vail, Colorado Police Department. Fourth Vice President Cynthia Renaud, Chief of Police, Folsom, California Police Department. Second Vice President Paul Sell, Chief of the Montclair State University Police Department in New Jersey. First Vice President Louis Deckmar, Chief of Public Safety for the City of LaGrange, Georgia. Immediate Past President Terrence Cunningham, Deputy Executive Director, IACP. and IACP Executive Director and Chief Executive Officer, Vincent Tallucci. Let's also welcome our host chief, Philadelphia Police Department Commissioner, Richard Ross Jr. And Jim Kenney, Mayor of the City of Philadelphia. And now, please welcome the President of the International Association of Chiefs of Police, Donald DeLuca, Chief of the Doral, Florida Police Department.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to all of you, our IACP delegates and distinguished guests. It is my privilege to call to order the opening ceremonies of the 2017 Annual Conference and Exposition of the International Association of Chiefs of Police. Please rise now for the presentation of the colors and the national anthem of the United States, and remain standing through the invocation.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light, where so proudly we hail at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watch were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets regular, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
The United States National Anthem was performed by Officer Gerald Latham from the Atlantic City Police Department. Let's give him a special thanks for that remarkable performance. Please join me in welcoming Reverend Malcolm T. Byrd.
Would you join me in honoring our God? Eternal God in heaven, as we stand before you with humble hearts and reverence for your sovereign will, we seek your guidance and blessings as we exercise and fulfill our responsibilities of leadership during this, the 124th Annual Conference and Expo of the International Association of Chiefs of Police. Thou, who has sculpted from the volume of space and time this present moment and place it in which we gather, we present you with our adoration and praise. We thank you for the opportunity to find common ground and praise and purpose in the cradle of democracy, celebrated as the city of brotherly love and sisterly affection. We thank you for every leader present today and for watching over the guardians you entrust to their oversight, who patrol our streets and protect our homes, businesses, and places of worship from day to day. May all wear the badge and uniform with honor, integrity, and dignity befitting their office. May you find pleasure in their acts of heroism, consistent expressions of compassion, and their disbursement of mercy. May they enjoy the peace that they promote and preserve. With heartfelt thanks and blessing, we pray in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ. Amen.
Thank you, Reverend Byrd. Welcome to Philadelphia. What a great location for us to get together this year. And what a conference. We have over 500 separate scheduled events, including 200 workshops and over 600 exhibiting companies. Since these will be very full days, you may want to download the 2017 IACP Annual Conference mobile app from either Google Play or iTunes. Here's what you'll find on the app and more to expect at the conference.
The IACP 2017 mobile app is your one-stop resource for everything IACP. Stay on top of speaker and event schedules. Sort through over 200 educational offerings and more than 600 exhibits, offering the latest in products and services specifically designed to support law enforcement needs. Tailor your schedule to fit your interests. Use the app to vote on workshops you like best for rebroadcast throughout the conference. Visit the hub at booth 2525, the center of activity on the expo hall floor, where you can participate in media training, resume review, mock interview, new chief mentoring, or view the leaderboard and participate in the PwC's sponsored walking challenge. Remember to attend the General Assembly, Critical Issues Forum, and the Global Perspective Series, where you will hear the latest in policing trends and hot topics. Enjoy the numerous networking events taking place throughout the convention. Watch Philadelphia's Highway Patrol Motorcycle Drill Team's flawless performance on Sunday. Enjoy an Oktoberfest-themed evening at Chiefs Night while catching up with old colleagues and friends. And celebrate IACP's Leadership Award winners and the installation of the new board at the annual banquet. It's all at your fingertips at this year's IACP.
Another key to having a great conference experience is having a great host. So we want to certainly thank this year's host, the Philadelphia Police Department, for all the IACP conference preparations they've provided. Please join me in a round of applause for Commissioner Ross and the men and women of your department. And of course, we want to thank our sponsors. It's their support of the IACP that provides everyone with an excellent conference experience. So be sure to look for them at the Exposition Hall and other areas of the conference. We'll be hearing from them throughout the assemblies, in part through video messages like this one from Platinum sponsor Superion.
Every second of the day, public servants are hard at work helping communities thrive. From the police officer responding to a life-saving call, to the city manager balancing budgets and communicating with constituents. For over 3 decades, we've been inspired by the commitment and courage of these everyday heroes. At Superion, we know firsthand how bravery and dedication better the world around us. That's why we've chosen a name inspired by a higher standard of service. To us, Superion is more than just a name. It's our challenge to reach higher, year after year. Our mission is to power a better public experience. That means being bold, inspiring our employees and customers alike to take chances and embrace new ideas. Superion, powering the public experience.
It's now my pleasure to introduce the Mayor of Philadelphia, Jim Kenney. He is a Philadelphia native who, as the son of a firefighter, understands the lives of first responders. He's a lifelong public servant, first elected to office at age 32. His interest in people, their views, and their experiences plays a role in his stances on issues involving equality, inclusiveness, and human investment. Let's welcome Mayor Jim Kenney.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here, and I would like to extend my gratitude for the opportunity to speak to you here today. Welcome to Philadelphia. I hope that you will enjoy your stay, and I believe that you will find us to be a diverse and welcoming city. I encourage you all to get outside of Center City and find out why Philadelphia is known as the city of neighborhoods. Since I became mayor, building trust between our police and our communities, we've been building trust between the police and the communities that they serve. And because of our commitments to community policing and the great leadership of Commissioner Richard Ross, we are proud to be experiencing a 40-year low in our crime rate. I look forward to seeing the progress that comes out of this conference. I want to thank you, and before I turn it over to Commissioner Ross, I just want to acknowledge the fact that I think that policing, yourselves and the people who work with you, have the most difficult job in government, perhaps the most difficult job in society, and keeping people safe while at the same time respecting their civil rights. It's a very, very difficult balance, and I know the effort must be made every day to accomplish it. I admire what you do. I admire the sacrifices that you make and that your family makes to be in this profession. I wish you all Godspeed and good luck. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor Kenney. Like the mayor, Philadelphia Police Commissioner Richard Ross is also a native of this historic city. His department is the nation's 4th largest, and he's been at the forefront of the department's commitment to reform and accountability. He believes in community policing, serves as a mentor to the youth in his community, and is the national spokesperson for Big Brothers, Big Sisters, Bigs in Blue program. Please welcome Philadelphia Police Commissioner Richard Ross.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. First of all, welcome to everyone to Philadelphia. I hope you enjoy yourselves while you're here. To President DeLuca and your entire staff, thank you for what you're doing to further this profession. We're truly humbled and honored that you're here, and we welcome you back to Philadelphia. To all of you, thank you for your leadership and your commitment to law enforcement. We need you now more than ever. Obviously, we all know of the challenges we face in this profession, and they are myriad in numbers. But just to name a few, the opioid crisis, crime is ever a present one, terrorism, which changes the way we police events, and protests, which obviously you didn't have to go very far to see them here today. But all these things are things that indicate why, as leaders, we really need to undergird our men and women who do this job. Amazing men and women who get up every day to do the right thing and face many perils. So we absolutely have to be there for them, and it is our leadership that will do that. We have to be innovative and creative to support them. I am absolutely amazed on almost a weekly basis at the absolutely marvelous work that is done in Philly PD, and I'm sure you can echo those sentiments as well. And it will take each and every one of us and our commitment, our tenacity, in order to push it forward. But we have to be willing to think outside the box, not rest on our laurels, to be innovative. I remember my dad tells me a story of, it was a day he was sitting around and he was watching my mom cook. I guess football wasn't on, he didn't have anything better to do, and so he was harassing her about how she was cooking. She happened to be making a roast that day, and she saw her cut the ends of the roast off before she put it in the roasting pan. And my dad, being curious, he says, babe, why did you do that? And she says, I really don't know. I just learned it from watching my mom, and that's how you make a good roast, and that's just how I do it. But if you want to know, call my mom up and ask her. And he did that. And he said, Mom, because he called Grandma Mom, and he says, why does your daughter cut the ends of the roast off before she put it in the roasting pan? And she says, that's the way you make a good roast. Why are you asking me that? That's how I learned it. That's the way it's done. That's the way my mother taught me, and that's the way it should be done. You shouldn't ask questions like that. And so fortunately, my mom's grandmother was still living, and so mom-in-law said, why don't you call her and ask her? It's real simple. And so she called the 90-year-old grandmother and says, Grandmom, can you just explain why, your daughter or granddaughter are cutting the ends of the roast off before they put it in the roasting pan? And she said, baby, they're still doing that. My pan simply wasn't big enough. That's why I did it. And so I say that not to be funny, but to say that sometimes we are guilty of that in policing. How many times have you heard that's just the way we do it? And so it is those things that can hold us back, those mentalities. But I submit to you that as police professionals, as long as we're willing to step beyond that and go beyond that, I know that we can continue to advance this profession, and I know that we'll be much better for it. So I just want to thank each and every one of you for being here. May God bless and God keep each and every one of you.
Thank you, Commissioner Ross. Let's take a moment here to listen to a message from Platinum sponsor, Microsoft.
Dedicated law enforcement personnel put their lives on the line every day in an effort to reduce crime and create safer, more secure communities. Introducing the intelligence-led first response platform. Microsoft, along with industry-leading partners, has integrated cloud-based connected technology into patrol vehicles. These technologies are the most advanced data sharing and camera systems on the market today.
Mounted cameras can collect video day or night, and with secure cloud computing, video content can be uploaded, analyzed, and shared in ways that have never been possible before.
Data from body-worn cameras, in-dash cameras, aerial drones, ground robots, and other camera systems is accessible on a tablet or mobile device running Windows or other platforms. The intelligence-led first response platform allows officers to have more intelligence in the field, resulting in quicker response times, safer cities, and improved community relations.
we want to take a moment here to take care of some IACP business. Let's have immediate past President Terrence Cunningham and my dear friend come up here on stage to help us with that.
Thank you, President DeLuca. It's great to see everyone back for this year's conference. On occasion, the IACP gets the opportunity to honor members who have made an outstanding contribution to both the law enforcement profession and the IACP. Today, we have the opportunity to honor two such people. Retired Ontario Provincial Police Commissioner Gwen Boniface and retired Superintendent Ronald Serpis. We'll begin with a life member of the IACP nomination of Senator Boniface. Senator Boniface is a longtime member of the IACP. She served as the General Chair of the IACP's Division of State and Provincial Police and is a member of the IACP's Board of Directors and Executive Committee. Gwen spent 30 years with the Ontario Provincial Police in Canada, where she started as a constable and retired as commissioner in 2006. During this time, she was also the president of the Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police. She is also the recipient of the Order of Merit of Police Forces and the Order of Ontario. Senator Boniface also served with the United Nations Police Division, where she was tasked with addressing organized crime issues in conflict and post-conflict countries. Prior to working for the United Nations, Senator Boniface served for 3 years in Ireland as the Deputy Chief Inspector of the Garda Síochána Inspectorate. Senator Boniface also served as Deputy Executive Director of the IACP. In that role, she helped lead the association as it continued its mission to shape the future of the policing profession. Senator Boniface left IACP in the fall of 2016 when Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau appointed her to serve as a member of the Canadian Senate. Earlier this year, the IACP Board of Directors unanimously voted to award Senator Boniface life membership in the IACP as recognition of all of her efforts on behalf of the association and our profession. Life member recognition requires the approval of 2/3 of the membership present and voting today. Do I have a motion to approve the life membership for Senator Boniface? Do I have a second? All in favor, please signify by saying yes. All opposed signify by saying no. In the opinion of the chair, the yeses have it. Motion carried. I would now like to invite to the stage to be recognized for this honor, Senator Boniface. Please join me in congratulating Senator Boniface. Great. Congratulations, Gwen. Well deserved. Next is the nomination of Superintendent Ronald Serpis to serve as Honorary President of the IACP. Superintendent Ronald Serpis served as a police officer for 34 years in 3 separate police agencies. Superintendent Serpis began his police career in June 1980 with the New Orleans Police Department. He rose through all civil service rank positions and was appointed Assistant Superintendent of Police and the first Chief of Operations in October 1996. He was appointed to head the Washington State Patrol in August of 2001 and led that agency until January 2004. In 2004, he was appointed Chief of the Nashville Police Department and served until 2010, when he was appointed Superintendent of the New Orleans Police Department until he retired from police service in August 2014. Superintendent Serpis became a life member of IACP in 2011 and has played a leadership role in the association throughout his career. He was the founding co-chair of the IACP's Research Advisory Committee and is the current chair of the IACP's Community Policing Committee. He also serves as IACP's governing body parliamentarian. In 2011, Superintendent Serpis was elected to the office of 4th Vice President on the IACP's Executive Board. When he retired from law enforcement in 2014, Superintendent Serpis was the IACP's 2nd Vice President. If he had not retired from law enforcement service, Superintendent Serpis would have served as IACP's President in 2016. In recognition of all of his efforts on behalf of the association and the profession, the IACP Board of Directors unanimously voted to designate Superintendent Ronald Serpis as an honorary president of the International Association of Chiefs of Police. His term of office to coincide with the 2017 annual conference. Honorary president recognition requires the approval of 2/3 of the membership present and voting today. Do I have a motion to designate Superintendent Ronald Serpis as honorary president of the IACP? Okay. Do I have a second? Okay. All in favor, please signify by saying yes. All opposed, signify by saying no. In the opinion of the chair, the yeses have it, motion carried. I would now like to invite Honorary President Serpis to the stage to be recognized. Congratulations, Ron. One more time. Congratulations, Ron. Great. Okay, so we're just about ready to hear from our keynote speaker, but first, here's a platinum sponsor, NEC Corporation of America.
NEC is a global leader in IT and networking. We make cities safe with the world's top-rated biometrics identification technologies. We keep society secure using our intelligent surveillance system. We support business efficiency with optimum IT services. And we connect people through reliable communication infrastructure. With $25 billion sales worldwide and 100,000 employees, NEC is creating value for society.
Orchestrating a brighter world, NEC.
I have a few program notes for you. On Monday at 10 a.m., the General Assembly, the IACP Target Police Officer of the Year Award will be presented. You will hear from Cressida Dick, Commissioner of the London Metropolitan Police, and United States Attorney General Jeff Sessions. Voting for this year's candidates will take place all day Monday from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. You can cast your vote in the Broad Street Atrium on the 100 level of the Convention Center. This year, we have 3 candidates for the office of 4th Vice President. Please be sure to take the time to meet with the candidates and vote to help shape the future of our association. Anyone who intends to announce their candidacy for the IACP office for 2018 can do so at the end of Monday's General Assembly. On Tuesday at 10 a.m., the Critical Issues Forum will take place in this ballroom. This will be an in-depth discussion on how public perception of law enforcement and the actions of officers and their agencies have been impacted in the 3 years since Ferguson, Missouri. Our panelists are Chief Scott Thompson of the Camden County, New Jersey Police Department, Jim Pasco, Senior Advisor to the President of the National Fraternal Order of Police, Sheriff Rick Stanek from the Hennepin County Sheriff's Office, Minnesota, Chief Delrish Moss of the Ferguson, Missouri Police Department, and Vanita Gupta, President and Chief Executive Officer of the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights. Much of what has been discussed has been making headlines in recent years. We know that anyone who keeps up with the news can come to the conclusion that our jobs are at the very least demanding. Our jobs are dangerous, and often we're unappreciated, which can sometimes leave us grasping for a sense of accomplishment. When do we know we're winning at our jobs? What does success look like? Is it a matter of numbers, calls answered, response time, the number of arrests? Or have you achieved success when you know your community is secure with your agency? Start with why. Author and optimist Simon Sinek joined us last year and is backed by popular demand. You have questions about what winning means? He has some answers. He'll start us off, and then Simon can take your questions. We have microphones set up in the room, so please bring your questions to him. We will also have a few more brief reminders to go over after the Q&A session, so please plan on staying. Now, let's welcome back Simon Sinek. Counting on you.
So in January of 1968, the North Vietnamese forces launched a surprise attack against the Americans on the day of Tet. Tet is the Vietnamese equivalent of Christmas, and for decades prior, there was never any fighting on the day of Tet, just out of tradition, just like the Christmas ceasefires in World War I. But on this Tet, they decided to fight. 85,000 troops were thrown at 100 targets that day. The amazing thing was, the Americans repelled every single attack. At the end of most of the fighting had ended after about a week. Hue went on for about a month. Fewer than 1,000 American troops had fallen. The North Vietnamese lost 35,000 of the 85,000 troops that attacked that day. In fact, if you look at the Vietnam War as a whole, America lost 58,000 troops over 10 years. North Vietnam lost 3 million troops over the course of those same 10 years, which is the equivalent population of 27 million of our own. In fact, a very close study of the Vietnam War, you'll see that America won almost every single battle we fought. So it raises the question, how do you win every battle and lose the war? Maybe we don't fully understand what winning and losing means. If you have at least one competitor, you have a game. And there are two types of game. You have a finite game, and you have an infinite game. Finite games are defined as known players, fixed rules, and an agreed-upon objective. Football. We all agree that whoever has more points at the end of the game is the winner. The game concludes, and we all go home. Then you have an infinite game. An infinite game is defined as known and unknown players. The rules are changeable, and the objective is to keep the game in play, to keep the game going. When you have a finite player versus a finite player, the system is stable. Football is stable. When you have an infinite player versus an infinite player, the system is also stable. For example, the Cold War. The Cold War was stable because you cannot have a winner or a loser in an infinite contest. What happens is players drop out of the game when they run out of the will or resources to continue to play. But the game perpetuates with or without the particular players. Problems arise, however, when you pit a finite player against an infinite player, because a finite player is playing to win, and an infinite player is playing to keep playing. And this is what happened to the United States in Vietnam. We were fighting to beat the North Vietnamese, and the North Vietnamese were fighting for their lives. And there's a very different set of strategic choices that are going to be made. So I get thinking about other things, like business, for example. The game of business is an infinite game. There's no such thing as winning the game of business. Law enforcement is an infinite game. You can't win law enforcement. And if you drop out of the game, law enforcement, crime, all of that stuff continues. There's no such thing as winning. In other words, it's an infinite game. But if you listen to many organizations, both in law enforcement and in business, for example, they don't know the game that they're in. They talk about being number one, being the best, beating their competition. Based on what metric? Based upon what agreed upon a metric? Based on what time frame? A month? A year? 5 years? 10 years? 50 years? 100 years? There's no such thing as winning these games. So this became very clear to me when I had an experience. I spoke at an education summit at Microsoft back when Steve Ballmer was the CEO. I also spoke at an education summit for Apple. At the Microsoft summit, about 70% of the executives spent about 70% of their presentations talking about how to beat Apple. At the Apple summit, 100% of the executives spent 100% of their presentations talking about how to help teachers teach and how to help students learn. One was obsessed with where they were going, the other one was obsessed with beating their competition. Guess which one was in quagmire? So at the end of my talk at Microsoft, they gave me a gift. They gave me the new Zune when it was a thing. This was Microsoft's competition to the iPod. And I have to tell you, this thing was a beautiful piece of technology. It was absolutely fantastic. It was beautifully designed. It worked flawlessly. The user interface was incredible, so user-friendly, amazing. At the end of my Apple talk, I'm sharing a taxi with a senior Apple executive, sort of employee number 12 kind of guy, and I decided to stir the pot. So I turn to him and I say, you know, I spoke at Microsoft, and they gave me the new Zune, and it is so much better than your iPod Touch. To which he turns to me and he says, I have no doubt. Conversation over. Because the infinite player understands that there's no such thing as winning. The infinite player understands that sometimes you have a better product and sometimes they have a better product. The goal is not to win every battle. The goal is to outlast the competition. So what does it take to play an infinite game? As it turns out, there's a checklist. It's literally a checklist. You have to go through the checklist. You can have the bottom 3 things, and if you don't have the first 2, it won't work. This is the checklist that you need to play the infinite game. 1, you must have a just cause. 2, you must have courageous leadership. 3, you must have a vulnerable team. 4, you must have a worthy adversary. And 5, you must have an open playbook. Just cause is where it starts. Yes, there are always finite games within the infinite game, of course, of course. When you're trying to break a drug ring or running down a criminal, or you have to catch someone speeding on a highway, of course, that's a finite game. There's a beginning, middle, and end, and at the end, we all go home and the competition is complete. But in general, law enforcement continues. We have to have a just cause. Being the best, being number one, making more arrests is not a conclusion of anything. A just cause is something more noble, something that people know that they would willingly sacrifice time and energy or more because it would be worth it. They would be willing to even put their jobs on the line because it's the right thing to do. No one is inspired to be the best. It runs out. No one knows when we've reached it, and the game becomes slower and less inspiring. But a just cause that people believe in is the first thing we need. Then we have to have courageous leadership. People who are willing to promote the just cause and put the just cause before anything else. That doing the right thing is more important than any quota, any target, any number that must be hit. In fact, courageous leaders would sacrifice those numbers to advance the just cause and willingly stand up to all of the pressures that are coming down on them to make numbers in order to do the right thing. We must have courageous leadership that believe in the cause. And if we look at any great events that ever happened in our history ever, there was always courageous leaders who championed the cause over anything else. The third thing is a vulnerable team. That doesn't mean we walk around crying. A vulnerable team is a culture in your organization in which the people who work in that organization feel safe enough to say, I made a mistake. I'm scared. I'm having troubles at home, and it's affecting my work. I don't feel qualified to do the job you've asked me to do without any fear of humiliation or retribution. That kind of culture, if that does not exist, what you get is a culture of lying, hiding, and faking. What you get is a culture of people pretending that they've never made a mistake or they cover them up. You get a culture of people pretending that they're qualified to do a job that they don't feel qualified to do. You get a culture in which people put on a brave face even though they're struggling with their kids at home and they know it's affecting their work. They're struggling to sleep and we know it's affecting their work. And maybe they're afraid to do the job they're doing and yet they won't tell anybody. And things will compound and compound until something breaks. When I heard about what happened on United Airlines, and we all know what happened on that day where that poor passenger was dragged off the plane and suffered a concussion, missing teeth, and a broken nose, immediately my heart went out to that crew. Because I can guarantee you that that crew knew the right thing to do, but feared getting in trouble more than doing the right thing. That's exactly what happened. In fact, I saw it play out in a much smaller case, because that's what happens in these things. They start small and they build and build and build until we get to something like that. I saw it play out and right in front of me. I was boarding a plane for a business trip that I was taking, and a scene played out in front of me where one of the passengers attempted to board the aircraft before their group number was called, which, as everybody here knows, that's a felony. And that's exactly how the gate agent treated the passenger. "Step aside, sir. I haven't called your group yet. Please step aside and wait till I call your group," is exactly how she talked to him. So I spoke up. I said, "Why do you have to talk to us that way? Why can't you talk to us like we're human beings?" And she looked me in the eye and said, "Sir, if I don't follow the rules, I could get in trouble or lose my job." All she revealed to me is that her leaders do not trust her to do the job for which she's been trained to do, and she does not feel safe in her own organization. And guess who suffers? Customer and company. The reason we love flying Southwest Airlines is not because they have some magical formula on how to hire great people. It's because the people who work there feel safe inside their own organization, and their leaders trust them to do the job for which they've been trained to do. In fact, I saw this play out remarkably. I was in Las Vegas, and I was staying at the Four Seasons in Las Vegas. It's a beautiful, beautiful hotel. And the reason it's a beautiful hotel is not because they have fancy beds. Any hotel can buy a fancy bed. It's because of the people who work there. That when you walk through the hallways and somebody says hello to you, you get the distinct feeling that they wanted to say hello to you, not that they were told to say hello to you. So the Four Seasons in Vegas happens to have a coffee bar in the lobby. So one afternoon, I went and bought a cup of coffee. And the barista who was working that day, his name's Noah, was absolutely fantastic. He was funny, he was engaging, and I spent far too long standing there buying a cup of coffee because I was just so enjoying Noah's company. And so, as is my nature, I said to Noah, "Do you like your job?" And immediately, Noah said, "I love my job." So I quickly followed up. "What is it that the Four Seasons is doing," I asked, "that you would tell me you love your job?" And without skipping a beat, Noah said that throughout the day, managers will walk past him and ask him how he's doing. Not even just his manager, any manager. And then he said something magical. He said, "I also work at Caesar's Palace. And there the managers walk past me and catch me if I'm doing something wrong. There they're making sure I'm doing everything right. There I like to just keep my head below the radar to get through the day so I can get my paycheck." He said, "Only at the Four Seasons do I feel I can be myself." Now, your customer experience is going to be totally different when you go buy a cup of coffee from Noah at the Four Seasons versus Caesar's Palace. It's the exact same person. The problem isn't with the people. The problem is with the leadership environment in which Noah has been asked to work. And I would submit that almost every problem that we have in law enforcement or business or other places is rarely, if ever, the people. It's almost always the environment in which they work. And the reason is because we do not have these vulnerable teams. We do not create corporate cultures in which people feel that they can be fully themselves at work, where putting on airs or putting on brave faces becomes normal. That stress is more than any human being can bear. The next thing we need is a worthy adversary. Now, as I said before, in all finite games, in all infinite games, there are also finite games, but the infinite players see something as a worthy adversary. They see someone, or human nature in the case of law enforcement, that would be a worthy adversary. And the goal is not to be number one. The goal is not to beat the competition. The worthy adversary is there to make us better at what we do. When Bernard Law Montgomery was picked to be the commander of the Northern forces in World War II to fight against Rommel in North Africa, he wrote in his autobiography, "I've heard great things about this Rommel, and I'm excited to meet him on the battlefield." I've heard great things is how he defined his mortal enemy. In other words, he had deep respect for his enemy. He understood that his enemy pushed him to be a better general, to be a better tactician, to be a better strategist. He hung a portrait of his enemy, of Rommel, in his quarters, not to throw darts at, as a reminder to him of how good his competition was. Sometimes hubris gets the best of us. We think we're better than our competition, and yet it's the infinite players who understand we have to have respect for our competition because they make us better at what we do. It's the difference between how fast you run when you run by yourself, when you're in just for a training run, and how fast you run when you're in a race. We run faster in a race because our competition makes us better. Now, you can rally people against something, and this is one of the problems with having enemies. We can rally people against, but only if we have a just cause do we understand that when the competitor falls out of the game, we find a new competitor. So in the early days of Apple, it was IBM, and IBM dropped out of that game. Then it was Microsoft, and Microsoft dropped out of that game. And now it's Google and Samsung, but the cause remains the same. It's the competitors who keep showing up, because in an infinite game, the players come and go, but the game continues without you. Have to have a worthy adversary, someone you respect. It was one of the funny things, I think, for any of you who've watched Narcos on Netflix, which I think is remarkable. I always thought that the war on drugs was funny, is because in law enforcement we wanted to beat the drug dealers, and drug dealers just want to do more drug deals. Like, they're not looking to beat the police, they're looking to do more drug deals. In other words, they have an infinite advantage. The goal of all infinite players is to deny your competitor will and resources. That's how you play the game. You suck them of will and resources. That's what the North Vietnamese did to us. We won all the battles, but they sucked us of will and resources until we decided to drop out of the game. That's how it works. The fifth thing you need is an open playbook. In other words, the cause must be permanent, but the strategy is flexible. The best example I have is George Eastman. Back in the late 19th century, there was a young man named George Eastman living in Rochester, New York. George Eastman was an enterprising young man, wanted to make money. He worked in a bank at the time, and he saw all of his richest customers come into the bank. They all owned property. They were all landowners. So he thought, if I'm going to make money, I got to own property. So he went out and started prospecting for land in Rochester. And back in those days, photography was something that was only done by professionals. So he took all of these chemicals and plates and all of these things to take pictures of the land that he was interested in buying. He's an enterprising guy. It was too complicated and dangerous to bring all of that stuff. And so he came up with a technology where he could put it all on a single plate. Turns out, people wanted that too. A man obsessed with simplicity came up with a new idea and started selling these plates instead of buying property. He later improved the technology until he invented film. And film was originally all self-contained in a single box camera. You took 100 pictures and sent the camera back in, and they would develop it for you. Again, back in those days, photography was something that was only done by professionals. So there was a huge, big photography industry event in London, and George Eastman went to London to show off his new technology. And everybody loved his new film, adored it. And no one bought one because the quality just wasn't good enough. And for the professionals, they wanted something that was less grainy. So George Eastman could have gone back and improved the technology to do something that was good for the marketplace where the demand was already high, but he didn't. He pivoted. He had an open playbook. His cause was the same, to simplify things, and he completely changed course. He decided to sell his film to a group of people who didn't care at all about the quality, the general population. And the man literally invented mass photography. Literally invented it. He became the 6th richest man in all of the United States. He made billions. He was up there with the Carnegies and the Rockefellers. And then many years later, after George Eastman had already died, Kodak invented the digital camera in the late 1970s. And they suppressed the technology for fear that it would cannibalize film sales. In other words, they'd close the open playbook. This is how we make money. This is the only way we do things. This is how it's always been done. And it would be too expensive for us to change, even though we've invented this technology that we know is better. They gave themselves 10 years. They knew over the course of 10 years, someone else was bound to invent the technology, reinvent the technology. You know what they did over the course of those 10 years? Nothing. They did absolutely nothing. Because the thought of having to change all their factories and take a dip in the short-term numbers, they didn't want to do it. And now, Kodak has been basically rendered obsolete. In fact, their company is so small, the only thing they do, believe it or not, is make film for professionals. That's it. They could have invented all the digital cameras. And so the point is, do we have a concept of the infinite game that we are playing? And it begs the question, if we can build our organization to play the infinite game, what does it mean to live an infinite life? Clearly, all of our lives are finite. We know that. But if you play by finite rules, that means all you want to do is accumulate money and power. And by the time you die, even if you have more money and more power than anyone else, even if you're number one in however you want to measure the category, you don't win life. In fact, if you think about it, on our tombstones, nobody wants the last balance in our bank accounts on our tombstones. Then our ex-wives would find out how much money we have. That's a joke. What we want to be remembered by is what we did for others. He gave, she loved, devoted father, devoted mother. And this is what it means to live an infinite life, that we live our lives so that after we are gone, an organization, the lives of the people with whom we have interacted are better because we were in their lives. We see this all the time in politics. Second-term presidents become obsessed with their legacies. Why not first-term presidents? People who retire become obsessed with their legacies. Why not 20-year-olds or 25-year-olds? Why do we only think about the legacy we leave when we face our own mortality? Why not play the infinite game now and devote our lives to improving the lives of people around us? And this is what it means to outlast, that our ideas and our impact will outlive us. The best leaders, the best people, and the best organizations all play the infinite game. Should we do some questions? How's that? Good? Good? Awkward silence? Okay, what questions do you have? Anything you like. They got mics here. Just so you know, I'm more comfortable with awkward silences than you are. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you very much, sir. My name is Patrick Johnson. I am from the Sierra Leone Police in West Africa.
Yes.
I would like to say how much I'm impressed by the brief talk you've given to us here. Is it possible for us to have, a recording of what you've just gone through here?
I do not know. We have to ask somebody else. There's cameras, so I assume it was recorded.
Thank you.
You're welcome. That was an easy question.
Yeah, sorry.
That's okay.
Thank you very much.
I have a question for you.
Yeah, hi.
The fourth criteria was a noble adversary.
A worthy adversary.
Worthy adversary.
Yes.
How do we make that relatable to our troops while balancing the guardian and warrior mindset?
Yeah.
Because the adversary changes depending on what call for service you're going on
Sure.
or what project you're working on. et cetera. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about making that approachable to the troops.
Yeah, I think a worthy adversary in your case is all of the forces that would push someone into a life of crime. Now, if there's mental instability, of course, that's harder for a police officer to guard against, per se. But I think all of the forces that force someone to lead to a life of crime, I think has a police officer show up and understand that the worthy adversary, not in the finite context, but in the infinite context, is a force larger than the people that they interact with. And I think that's how to think about this, which is it's not police versus person, police versus criminal, but rather all of the forces that would push someone into a life of crime. And the idea is how to combat those things. Of course, in the infinite context, you'll never win the war, but you'll die trying, and that's the point. That's what makes it a just cause. And I think you know this better than I do. When I did a ride-along with the NYPD, and they were nice enough to take me into the most dangerous zip code in New York City. And we drove up to, there was a group of people sitting outside, and they were all drinking outside. So obviously not allowed to do that, and having a grand old time. And the cops said, "Stay here." And I watched them as they got out, and they talked to the folks. And it was a very nice conversation. There was a lot of handshaking, and the guys put their alcohol away, and the cops came back. And I said to them, "What happened there?" They said, "Well, we talk to these guys a lot. They're from the neighborhood. We know them. And we made a deal with them. They know that they're breaking the law, and that's not the problem. People who break the law generally know they're breaking the law." And the cop said to them, "Hey guys, you know we have to do our jobs, but we're going to make you a deal. Sometimes we'll get you have to give us one, and sometimes we'll give you one. Sometimes we got to give you guys tickets because you're breaking the law, and sometimes we'll let you off. But we got to make it fair." And so when the cops walked up to them, they smiled and said, "Is this one of ours or this one of yours?" In other words, there was empathy that there's nothing going on. They're not actually causing any disturbance. They're technically breaking the law, which means the law has to be enforced, of course. But it wasn't this draconian coming down on them hard. And there was a tremendous empathy for what they were doing and took the things in context. And I think context is really important. I think in your profession, I think context is often missing the way the general population sees what you're doing, and sometimes probably even inside the organization. I'll give you a real-life example that happened in the United States Air Force. These are two true stories. We have a very, very simple rule in the United States Air Force. Do not fly into Iranian airspace. Really simple. So there is a KC-135 tanker where the crew got lost, and they drifted into Iranian airspace. And of course, it sets off all the alarms and bells and whistles. There was another incident, completely unrelated, completely separate date, where a KC-135 tanker was doing circles, they're in a holding pattern, and a fighter jet was running very, very low on gas and was going to run into some trouble. And the crew realized that it would take a long time for them to go around Iranian airspace to get to him. The quickest way was to cut through Iranian airspace, and that's what they did. They made the decision to cut through Iranian airspace. Now, by the letter of the law, they both broke the same rule, and they should both be punished equally, but they weren't. The crew that got lost got in trouble because they were morons. The crew that made the decision to cut across Iranian airspace, nothing happened to them. In fact, they were commended. Now, they knew that they could get in trouble, and they took that risk because for them, the just cause of saving a life was worth breaking the rules. And that's really the foundation of trust. We don't trust people to follow the rules. We trust people to know when to break the rules. Because there are always circumstances where there are higher causes, usually life and death, where any rule can be broken, and it's the right thing to do. And context really, really matters. There's one thing I want to share with you that I think is relevant to police work today. It was shared with me by the Director of Operations of SEAL Team 6. And I asked him, how do you choose guys to go into SEAL Team 6? Because they have to work in the regular SEALs for a bunch of years before they're even eligible to try out for SEAL Team 6. And he said to me, we look at two axes. We look at performance, and we look at trust. He says, of course, nobody wants this person, the low performer of low trust. He says, of course, everybody wants this person, the high performer of high trust. What we learned is that this person, the high performer of low trust, is a toxic leader. And we would rather have a medium performer of high trust, sometimes even a low performer of high trust, it's a relative scale, over this person. And just to be clear, the way they define trust and performance, performance is trust on the battlefield, and the way they define trust is trust off the battlefield. So the way they say it, I trust you with my life, but I don't trust you with my money or my wife, is what they say. The irony is we have 1,000,001 metrics to measure someone's performance, and we have negligible to no metrics to measure someone's trustworthiness. And yet we very often promote these people simply because they're good at their job, but they don't necessarily help build a culture of leadership or a culture of vulnerability. These people do. And here's the joke. These people are incredibly easy to find. Just go ask the people on the team who's the asshole, and they all point to the same person. Right? And by the way, if you ask them, who do you trust more than anybody else, who's always got your back, they'll also all point to the same person. It's your most gifted natural leader. And it's probably one of these people who we don't look at, because even though they're helping everyone else work at their natural best, they may not be your highest performer. There is no correlation between performance and leadership. Tommy Lasorda was a so-so ball player and an amazing coach. Isaiah Thomas was an amazing player, not a very good coach. There's no correlation. And yet we tend to promote high performers, and yet we don't consider whether they're actually good leaders. And this is one of the biggest struggles I think all organizations face, and I think law enforcement faces this as well, which is when somebody enters the police force, we give them tons of training how to do their job. We teach them the law, we teach them firearms, we teach them arrests, we teach them driving skills, tons and months worth of training how to do the job so that they will be good at their jobs. And if they're good at their jobs and we promote them, eventually they get promoted to a position where they're now responsible for people who do the job that they used to do, and yet we don't teach people how to do that. We don't expect them to be good police officers just off the street. We have to train them to be good police officers, and yet for some reason when we put people in leadership positions, we just expect them to be good at leadership. We don't teach people leadership. We don't teach communication skills. We don't teach conflict resolution. We don't teach listening. We don't teach how to give or receive feedback. We don't teach how to build an environment in which people feel that they can be vulnerable to their boss. It has nothing to do with personality. You can be rough around the edges. It doesn't matter. It has to do with how people feel, and that they feel that you care about them, their lives, who they are as human beings, more than your own promotion and your own advancement in your own career. They feel that. Every single one of us in this room has worked for somebody who had our back, who believed in us, who took a risk on us. And we have undying loyalty to those people. We have love for those people. We trust those people. We confide in those people. Every single one of us has also worked for somebody who we know cares much more about themselves than they do about us. We do not trust those people. We keep our walls high and we keep protected, and we would never tell them anything that would make us vulnerable. So the question is why can't we get more people like this leading our organizations rather than this? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Simon. I have a question. You talked about courageous leaders.
Yes.
You also talk about vulnerable teams.
Yes.
I know vulnerability can sound negative.
Yes.
So I know that it's not, but I'd like for you to talk more about the characteristics of vulnerable teams.
Yeah. So as I said before, vulnerability is not about lacking, right? It's about feeling safe enough at work to say to our colleagues or our superiors, I made a mistake, a small mistake, because mistakes can be fixed. And when someone makes a mistake, we can coach them. There are very few things that somebody on a front line can do, unless it involves a firearm or breaking the law, that can't be fixed and can't be coached. And yet we tend to come down much harder on junior people than we do on senior people who break rules. And it sets a tone that you're safe at the top, but you're not safe at the bottom. That's what vulnerable team means. Vulnerable team means that just like with a parent, you can yell at your kids, but your kids still love you. In an effectively led organization, we can discipline and yell at people, but they don't rebel or decide they hate us. They actually take responsibility and say, you're right, I'm sorry, I'll do better. And when we feel that someone has our backs, when we feel that if we screw up, somebody would sooner rush in to coach us, when we feel that somebody deals with us with empathy, let me give you an example. This is a lack of empathy. This is a normal scenario in many organizations, right? Your boss walks into your office and say, you screwed up again. You made the same mistake for the third time. If you don't fix your act, I don't know if I can help you next time. Inspiring speech, coach, right? Or they walk into your office and say, this is the third time you've made this mistake. I'm worried about you. Are you okay? What's going on? I know you're stronger than that. And when we feel that somebody actually cares about us as a human being, it's amazing how much we open up and ask for help. It's amazing how much we open up and ask for help. And just based on the little work that I've done since the last time I was at IACP, I think too many, because I went out to the LA Sheriff's Department and we had an amazing conversation with a whole bunch of police officers from all across Southern California. They all came in. And I think police work suffers from many of the same things that our friends in the private sector are suffering from, which is there is a cultural problem in some of the police forces. And it's not police versus the general public. And the general public saying what's wrong with police, and police simply saying, well, you don't understand what we have to do. And it's this us versus them. Amazingly, I think it's all exactly the same thing, which our friends who work in the private sector are going to work on a daily basis and are afraid that they're going to get laid off if the company misses its arbitrary projections. They work in corporate cultures in which they don't feel that anybody's watching out for them, their careers, their backs, them as human beings. And the people who keep getting promoted in their works are these people, the toxic leaders, because they happen to be good at the job but don't care about anybody else but themselves. That's how they go to work. And we know that stress levels are on the rise. We know that diabetes is on the rise, heart disease is on the rise, some cancers are on the rise, all because of stress-related disorders. We know how our friends feel. They keep talking about lack of work-life balance. And by the way, no amount of yoga fixes that. The imbalance is I feel safe at home, I do not feel safe at work. That is unfortunately normal in America today in private sector. I would argue that if we were to be really honest with ourselves and take a look underneath the veil, that there are too many policing organizations where that culture is similar, where command and control leadership is too prevalent, whereas empathetic leadership could be better, could be more. That too many police officers are going to work every day and don't feel safe inside their own organizations. They fear making a mistake more than doing the right thing. That stress that they feel they would never share for fear of being called weak or for fear of revealing something that makes them insecure. And that the irony is it's that ability that makes teams strong. It's nothing to do with thin blue lines or anything like that. It's that I can turn to somebody and say, I'm scared. I screwed up. And everybody goes, it's okay, we'll fix it together. We all got this, we got your back. And I'm not talking about when guns are drawn and adrenaline is pumping. I'm talking about day-to-day boring stuff. Just the mundane daily work of police work, where we feel that someone is watching out for us. That's what I would submit. That many of the things that we're seeing going across the police forces that the general population is very, very angry about is not just about aggression and undertraining and firearms, but I want to know how those individual officers feel when they come to work every day. Just a thought.
Earlier this week, the commissioner of the National Football League and the owners met with player representatives. Following that meeting, the commissioner held a press conference, and I'm paraphrasing what I heard him say. He said that the cause of reforming the criminal justice system is greater than any short-term financial losses that they may endure. In the context of your remarks and presentation today, could you kind of analyze or dissect that for me?
I think our general population, one of the reasons I'm talking about this concept of finite and infinite, which is, the reason is to understand that we cannot fix, dare I say fix, I don't like that word, but policing in America, which is what the general population is pushing for us to do, pushing for you to do. It's not something you can do in a quarter or a year. And the difference to me is understanding the balance of consistency versus intensity, right? If you want to get into shape, you can't go to the gym for 9 hours and get into shape. It just doesn't work that way. But if you work out every single day for 20 minutes, you will absolutely get into shape. The problem is I don't know when. I know it's going to take more than a week. I know that. And I know if you see no results in a year, you're probably doing something wrong. I know that. I just don't know when. And the worst part is it's going to take different times for different people. Like some will get quicker and some will be slower. It's like brushing your teeth, right? The intensity is going to the dentist twice a year. I can schedule it, I know exactly how long I'm going to be there, and I can easily measure the results. What does brushing your teeth do for 2 minutes? It does absolutely nothing, unless you do it twice a day, every day. And then the question is, well, can I take a day off? Sure, we've all missed brushing our teeth because we're all too tired. But how many times can I not do it? Well, I don't know the answer to that. And I think a lot of the things that we have to do require consistency, but we're being asked to use intensity. We're being asked to implement a program or make a change at the top or have a leadership change. And instantly, everything's going to be fixed and better. And I just don't think that's how it works. That's not how you make cultural reform in any organization. Yes, there are elements of intensity, of course, but it's the daily consistency. It's the little things that eventually add up and change the quality of a corporate environment, that change the culture inside an organization. Just like when we're working out, we see nothing, we see nothing, we see nothing. In fact, in the short term, we actually feel pain. In other words, when we commit to ourselves, when we commit to eating healthy or getting healthy, there's always a short-term drop in performance, always. It hurts. And the pain goes away, and at some point, it gets easier, and somebody even says to you, you're getting into shape, you look great. They see it in us sometimes before we see it in ourselves. But we know 100% that getting healthy or eating healthy works. And the worst part is, once you're healthy, you have to keep doing it for the rest of your life. And I think this is one of the things that's probably required, both in policing and, quite frankly, in private sector. I see it all the time, which is we need to see the consistency of behaviors and the consistency of skills built in and done all the time. I have a Marine Corps general friend who says his test for good leadership is when you walk past somebody and say, how are you doing? You actually care about the answer. And if you don't, you're not really a leader. And we do this all the time. We all do it, where you're walking somewhere, you're running late. How you doing? Not good. I got to go to a meeting. I'll catch you later. We've all done it. If you ask, you stop. You'd be like, what's wrong? Right? And it's this kind of consistent behavior that I think is so missing. And I would concur. I think we, general public, is very uncomfortable with the fact that there may be a dip in performance in the short term, that there may be a cost associated with it. We want to implement a program. We want to see results the next week, the next month. And the way that we measure it is usually in crime statistics versus the health of an organization, the health of the people who work there. I actually want to know the health of the people who are in law enforcement. I literally want to know how healthy they are. I want to know the divorce rates. I want to know how well their kids are doing at school. Because I can promise you that if somebody is stressed at work, they are bringing that stress home, and it's having adverse effects on their marriages and on their children. Whereas if they feel good at work, they're bringing that home, and I can promise you they're having fantastic marriages, and their kids are also benefiting. I want to know that kind of stuff. I literally want to know the health of human beings when we're evaluating these things. But usually we don't. We measure the things that are easy to measure, not the things that are hard to measure. Does that help? Yes, hi.
Hi there. Your speech this year and last year are both really insightful and inspirational.
Thank you.
I think there's a number of us here from different size agencies, from the smallest to the biggest.
Yes.
You talk a lot about why.
Yes.
And I guess I'm really interested to know if you've got any insights as to how So if you were to become a leader of a large-scale police department,
yes,
how would you start to kind of get your message across through perhaps multiple scales of leadership?
Sure. So before we get to how, I think there actually needs to be a discussion of why. And I do not think that the average police force, large or small, actually does have a clear sense of why. There's some generic high-level thing, guardian and warrior, protect and serve, whatever's written on your average police car, you know? And it's so abstract and esoteric. I'm not sure it actually means anything to someone, right? The correlation would be in the military. Nobody runs into battle for God and country. Nobody's running into battle to protect democracy. It's just not happening. It's guy to the left and guy to the right every time. And yet, they have a problem in the military as well, which is how do I inspire some maintainer whose job it is to turn this wrench every single day of his life? Well, usually what they say is, you're turning that wrench so that the wings can stay on the aircrafts, so that the pilot can fly on a safe aircraft, so the pilot can perform his mission, drop his ordnance, and deliver our mission and preserve democracy around the world. Really hard to get there when you're doing this, right? There's too many steps in logic. And the same goes for protect and serve, or whatever the motto is. It's really hard to get there when you're being shot at, chased, that the general population is against you, the people you're trying to help are against you, everybody hates you until they need you. Like, protect and serve becomes a little bit abstract. Not to mention the fact that your average police officer is unbelievably cynical because they spend a life seeing the worst side of mankind, not the best side of mankind. And so we had an experience where I was out at RAF Mildenhall, and there was a senior maintainer, who was taken off the line, and his job was to drive me around base. Wonderful guy, right? And they took me and let me fly the KC-135. It's all about KC-135s today. KC-135 simulator, and I had my fun tooling around. And what I did was I invited him into the sim with me, which he's never been in his life. He's been in the Air Force for 20 years, never been in the sim. But I invited him in, and he got to see me fly. And I had my fun, and I turned to him and I say, "You want to fly?" And we put him in the left seat of the simulator, and we let this maintainer fly the plane that he works on. And we asked him, "What system do you work on?" Electronics. So in mid-flight, we turned off the electronics. And for the first time in his life, he actually was able to connect his work to what happens in the aircraft. For the first time in his life. So I've been going around the Air Force asking pilots, how many of you would give up the last 5 minutes of sim time to let a maintainer sit in and experience their system fail? Not as a reward, but part of their training. But it goes beyond that. Now the question goes back to the infinite game. How do you get this maintainer to connect this to his job? And the answer is every maintainer has two jobs. To make sure that this person and then that person not only are good at their jobs, but go home every day feeling that someone has their back and that they love their jobs. And they have to work hard every single day to ensure that the person who takes over the job from them eventually will be better at their job than they are. Right? So now they're not showing up to work every day. They're not just like doing this, but now they're always thinking about all the tricks that they're learning that they can pass on to somebody else. And we know the difference between rookies and senior police officers. We know that when you've had a little time to be in the force, you can see things, you can smell things, you can sense things. Just because you know you've seen it 1,000 times, it's hard to put into words, but it's in you. Stuff that's hard to teach. I would say, why can't we get people to actually learn how to teach that stuff? That their job is to make every police officer that comes after them, every person that starts it, even better than they are. And the systems, I think, that we have to implement and how we get people to create relationships, I think one of the things that police organizations are struggling with today, if you ask me, is the cell phone. I think the cell phone is actually hurting police force. I know there's wonderful things that we're doing with cell phones. They connect with you can have direct dials, and you can have the cops talk to each other. I get all that. But I've heard it and I've seen it. So I live in New York City. There was a police car that was parked, in my neighborhood, no big deal, that's normal. And I walked past, and there were two officers sitting in there, looking down at their phones, doing whatever they were doing. I went to the supermarket, came out about 20 or 30 minutes later. I walked past the same police car, and those same two police officers were sitting down, still looking down at their phones. I want them talking to each other. I want them standing outside the car. I want them making eye contact with the general public. In fact, I've heard from more senior police officers with some of the junior ones, that they'll put 2 junior police officers in a dangerous neighborhood, and they'll literally lean against the car like this for their entire shift, only looking up when they hear something. So now imagine how it makes the general population feel. Let me show you something. Can I borrow someone's phone real quick? I didn't bring mine up. Can I just borrow one real quick? I want to just show you something. There's a subconscious reaction. Thank you, sir. There's a subconscious reaction that happens with these devices, okay? What if I were to come out here on stage and hold my phone while I'm talking to you? I'm not checking it. It's not buzzing. It's not lighting up. I'm simply holding it. Do you feel like you're the most important thing to me right now? No, you do not. There's this subconscious reaction when we have our phones out, right? Which means when we're walking down the hall and somebody says, hey, boss, can I talk to you? You go, sure, what's on your mind? It actually sends a subconscious reaction that I don't really care, versus going, sure, what's on your mind? There should never be a cell phone in any conference room, because as soon as we put the phone on the table, it says to everyone in the room, this is not the most important thing to me right now. In fact, turning it upside down is not more polite. It's the same thing. It should be out of sight. Because what we do when we bring phones into conference rooms is we're interrupting the very normal human desire to interact. Because what we do is we all sit on our phones waiting for the meeting to start. The meeting starts, we put our phones down, wait for the meeting to end. But if we sit there waiting for the meeting to start, here's what happens if we don't have phones. We go, dude, what happened the other day? I heard. Oh my God, it was an insane day. Hey, how's your dad? I heard he was in the hospital. Oh, he's much better. Thank you for asking. We talk. And going back to consistency versus intensity, there's nothing you can do that can force people to fall in love with each other. There's nothing that you can do that you can force people to take care of each other and trust each other. It's a daily little thing. It's like falling in love or making friends. What day did your girlfriend or wife fall in love with you? You don't know. What did you do that made her fall in love with you? You don't know. It was lots and lots and lots of little things that you did that accumulated. One day she woke up and said, oh my God, I love him. It's the exact same thing inside an organization. Thank you, sir. Should we try it? Let's risk it. There we go. Oh! I hope it was a good case. Now look at the problem I've solved, though. You won't bring your phone into meetings anymore. So the point is there's nothing that we can do with intensity to force people to trust each other. It's these little mundane brushing of teeth events inside an organization that over the course of time, and my fear is that we're interrupting those events, both in meetings, at any kind of dinner table or lunch table, or when police officers are on the beat. I have no problem with the phone. I have no problem. Absolutely use it. My fear is that it's out of balance. And when there are 2 police officers leaning against their car during their shift, looking down, not only are they not talking to each other, but everybody who walks past doesn't feel like they care. They're not connecting. Versus just walking around and making eye contact, saying hi. Remember Noah at the Four Seasons? How you doing? Anything going on? Anything we can help with? And over the course of time, what starts to happen is we start to trust those officers on that beat more and more. They actually become familiar. Versus the looking down and feeling like they don't care. There's little things like that. The little things of consistency, I think, really matter. And in terms of implementing why, it has to be talked about and it has to be demonstrated. That we have to see our senior brass taking risks and doing the right thing, even putting their careers on the line to do the right thing. It inspires the rank and file to do the same. But when we come down hard on people, when we should be coaching people, again, there are a few exceptions, of course. I think we accidentally do damage to the culture. I have 1 more minute. I can squeeze in 1 more question. Yes, ma'am.
Hello.
Hello.
Thank you so much. You're amazing. I saw you last year, too.
Thank you.
So this question is really more general, maybe about the why.
Yes.
But this profession has gone through a lot of self-esteem issues in the national narrative over the last couple of years.
Yes.
And locally, I think we're all doing a pretty good job of trying to overcome that, build trust, et cetera. But internally in our organizations, our departments, our people are suffering, I think, culturally from this esteem issue. What, in short, could you tell us in a couple of minutes to help us work on the esteem levels within our organizations for our profession?
So what would you do if your son or daughter was suffering low self-esteem? right? It's the same kind of thing, right? One is to put them in situations so that they can learn themselves that they're actually capable of more than they think they are, right? But I also feel that police forces now are so used to being on the defensive, right? And that what we actually want is a collective accountability. That doesn't, to accept that we could be doing things better, right? It doesn't mean things are broken. It doesn't mean there's anything wrong, right? But it's about accepting we could do things better. And it's not about the way in which we police. It's the way in which we're teaching leadership, right? For police forces to say that we understand that there is a problem, to deny it is blind, right? And that we accept our share of accountability, right? It's not wholly the problem with police forces. I think the general population, I did a field work with Massachusetts State Police when I was in college, and I came in with all these student idealism saying, I'm going to help, fix relationships with them. And I was blown away. I was blown away by the number of people, and that once the troopers let me, once they trusted me, they would let me approach cars with them. I was blown away how many people we would pull over for a clear red light violation, for example. We'd walk up to the car, and immediately they would just start yelling at us. It was mind-blowing how many people immediately distrust police. I have no idea what reason. In other words, there's shared accountability. But the problem is, this is what leadership is. Leader doesn't mean you're in charge. Leadership means you have the courage to go first. The general population is probably not going to say, you know what? I think we've been mistreating the police for years. It's just not going to happen. But it could be very powerful if the police go first and say, I think we can do a better job in how we build our cultures, how we nurse our leaders, and how we protect the culture of the police force, because we think many of the things that are happening in America today are actually symptoms, not actually the problems. And I believe that if one party took accountability, the other party does too. We've all had fights with our spouses. And it only takes one to go, you know what, I'm sorry. I think I didn't help this situation by saying whatever I said. And immediately the other person goes, you know what, me too. And I think to truly demonstrate leadership would be to accept that there is some accountability, and that it's going to take all of us working together to fix it, because if we blame them and they blame us, it's over. It's only going to happen if we work together. Together really is better. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Simon. Listening to Simon helps us determine what success looks like within our agencies. And as soon as we're focused on why, our purpose as police leaders and community leaders becomes even more evident. That's why the IACP 2017 Conference and Exposition is all about, identifying solutions for a safer society. We're here to learn from each other's perspectives and experiences, and there is a lot more experiences to take advantage of here. So don't forget to use the mobile app and visit the hub so you don't miss anything. This now concludes the IACP 2017 opening ceremony. Have a great conference.